My guest, Dr. Anthony Birchwood, is here. I understand you became a victim of that thing that we sometimes run into when we least expect it. It's called traffic, but it's so good that you persevered and you were here. Good morning, sir.
My pleasure. And yes, I am happy to be finally here.
Yes, and I'm thankful that you're finally here. I've got myself 17 minutes and I've got to race through a whole lot of questions I had for you because at the end of the day, one of the things we see happening is that we hear the international agencies giving a downgrade to Trinidad and Tobago. There are three international companies that do this grading situation, all right? And Trinidad and Tobago haven't been cited for a sharp increase in the country's debt burden since 2014. Standards & Poor's, one of those three agencies, lowered Trinidad and Tobago's long-term sovereign credit rating from A to BBB+. You are an economist from the University of the West Indies. You understand how this works, and I need you to explain to us some of these things. Let's start with the idea of what is being moved from A- to BBB+. What does that mean?
Well, it means that you're rated as investment grade still. So we are still rated as investment grade, but moderate. So rating is a moderate one.
Right. I previously held a premium grade, but now I'm down to moderate.
Yeah, moderate.
What is the primary reason for the downgrade coming from S&P Standard & Poor in this instance?
Well, if you notice, all the oil producers, like OPEC countries, they have been downgraded too. We are not an exception. You see, oil is our primary resource. Just as for OPEC countries, oil is the primary resource. And as a result, when the oil prices are low, it's very likely that they will be downgraded because we are not diversified enough. Yeah. So, it's not surprising then that we who produce oil in our part of the world, we will be downgraded as soon as the oil prices fall. This has happened with OPEC countries, Saudi Arabia included, and
Yes.
Saudi Arabia has the world's largest oil reserves. So
we should not be surprised at this.
I'm not surprised.
Because we are, after all, comparatively speaking, just clients. We can't really determine anything, and the whole world is suffering this. So you.
But it is a signal, though, to investors that they need to raise their interest rate for you when you're down to moderate. You see, the highest level would have been AAA.
Triple A.
Triple A. If we could have been at triple A, which we are unlikely to, then of course we would pay low interest rates. You see,
that is what is impacted heavily because if you
Right.
were downgraded, you pay more money for borrowing development on money or any
that's
kind
right,
of money.
that's right.
Okay.
And you see what happened too is that countries in the world, right? They could be rated, they could have a very high debt, but they could still have a low rating because other countries in the world believe that they are capable of repaying the debt. So say United States, although they were downgraded recently, it wasn't so severe because countries believe that the United States could repay the debt anytime they like.
So that accounts for what they did when S&P said, for instance, we are downgrading you, but your country is still stable.
Yeah.
That is a sort of indicator that you are able to, for now, while you don't have the full assets you had before, you still have enough for me to consider you stable, so I will not bail out on you. Is that correct?
Yeah, but there's something else too. Given that we have heritage and stabilization funds,
Soften the impact, yes.
Yeah, the rating agencies will say, okay, since you are saving money, then you are capable of repaying.
Okay.
Now, if you look at countries like Singapore also have high debt situation. But countries in the world believe that Singapore is very capable of repaying the debt. So
And why would that be? Because of the political decisions as far as how they go about borrowing, about how they use their money, or about their resources or ability to get more revenue to in fact service that debt? I mean, which one is it?
also, it's because of the fact that they are seen as a high producing country because they generate massive foreign exchange. So even though they have a low, high debt, they're capable of generating the foreign exchange to repay the debt. Remember, the whole thing is about default, whether Singapore is likely to default on the debt. And definitely, the world doesn't think so.
I got you. Dr. Anthony Birchwood is my guest, and I guess it's in this area I will ask you the question. What specifically you interpret from S&P's conclusion that obstacles to sustained long-term growth will persist unless there is further structural reform to increase productivity in the labor market and reduce bureaucracy in the public service?
Yeah. Well, remember we have a high dependency on oil. And what the credit rating agency was hinting at there is that you need to move beyond oil, and your labor market need to be capable of generating further production in other goods, so that they were hinting at diversification. No, I should warn you, diversification is not something you could do in short term. That is something you have to do in the medium and long term.
Yes.
But this is a hint as to how we should do the budget, because we have to do budget shortly. And in a budget, you need to have a medium term, not a short term plan, but medium term planning and long term planning. Previously, we have been just doing budgets just on a yearly basis without a proper medium term and long term planning.
When they refer to bureaucracy, reducing the bureaucracy in the public service, are they speaking in terms of the bureaucracy, which means the amount of levels you have to go through to get things done, or are they euphemistically using that to say time to reduce that staff?
Well, I mean, the bureaucracy is important because of the fact that assures standards. Although it sounds like a negative word, bureaucracy, it sounds like a delaying term. The truth is that ensures standards. So that is why you have a civil service who actually have to maintain certain standards. So even when a minister advises X or Y, the permanent secretary could say no, because he has to maintain the standards, and so he has to maintain the bureaucracy. So yes, bureaucracy is still a good thing, eh?
No. I concur with that. The reason I ask it is because sometimes folks can say one thing when they in fact hinting you at something else. I mean, speaking of structural reform, that's one issue. And when you speak of reducing the bureaucracy, it can be purely the bureaucratic process, or it could be a hint that you've got to cut down the size of that purse. So I just asked that question. But there are three credit agencies in the world. The S&P, Moody's, and I believe Fitch.
Yeah.
All right. What is the difference between them? Because at some time, if you hear this, you've been downgraded here, somebody will say, yeah, but we didn't suffer as bad with this credit agency. And if you want to justify some loan you want to get, you go and use the report from another agency. So the three agencies, explain to me the difference in them, please.
I should say this first. In the Caribbean, we have credit rating agency for the Caribbean, especially for the Caribbean. What we have here is competition between credit rating agencies. Nothing is wrong with competition between credit rating agencies. I find often you'll realize that they follow each other. So they actually will use the same kind of survey, give the same kind of ratings. So it's a competition between them, but they follow each other in the end. In the Caribbean, we would have been arguing that, look, these credit rating agencies are not necessarily seeking our interests. We are small developing islands, countries, Guyana, not an island. So therefore, we should rate our own selves.
And that's because, just for our listeners' clarity, S&P and Moody's are both solely based in the United States,
Yeah.
and FIS is partly based in the United States and in another country. Okay, so
Yeah,
please
yeah,
go
yeah,
ahead.
yeah.
Yes.
Right. So we have developed our own credit rating agency, but we do not have the same prestige as Moody's or S&P or Fitch. But we're capable,
But that prestige is important because the people who are really doing the investors are international, and they would go with the credit agencies they consider the benchmark
Correct.
in ratings. Yes.
Correct. You see, there's a question of publicity. You coming from a small developing country, having a credit rating agency will not be taken with the same level of seriousness as, say, a Moody's, S&P, Fitch. So that's why they come from developed countries, and so international investors will go to the international credit rating agencies more than the Caribbean. However, the Caribbean credit rating agency renders good advice to
Good analysis too.
to companies. Yeah, so they do a very good analysis.
Dr. Anthony Birchwood is my guest. The reason I ask you that question, Doctor, and forgive me for just moving a little fast because I'm looking at the clock with one eye over here. And you said it's competition among the credit agencies. That's a good thing. But when Moody's moved Trinidad and Tobago to what investors call junk status, that is disturbing. Explain to us, what is junk status and why this difference of language that has such an impact? Because words are important. It is one thing to move me from A minus to BBB plus. It's another thing to move me to what folks, investors who are the important people, call junk status. Explain that, please.
Well, first let me explain that I'm not aware that we moved to junk status yet. Well,
to what investors are calling junk status is the report, yes.
Junk status means you're below investment grade.
Oh, okay.
We're not below investment grade as yet. You find like Barbados, they have been moved to junk status already.
And what is junk status?
Right. Meaning that you could borrow only at a very high interest rate because your stocks is considered to be below investment grade. And therefore, you have a negative outlook. You're not taken very seriously. And you have to really raise a lot of money to borrow. So it's not very easy for you to access loans when you're at junk status.
So explain to me that Moody's moved Trinidad and Tobago from BA1, all right, to BAA3.
Yeah, so you're still a stable outlook. Yeah, so we still have a stable outlook, but just that we downgraded a bit. And they took into account we have a Heritage and Stabilization Fund, and therefore we have savings. And as a result of that, they can move us down, but you're still considered to be stable.
All right, so I'm not inside the team as you and your colleagues are. You are right in the team of the economic world. I, as a citizen, hear that I have been downgraded is the reason I ask you here to make it clear for me and listeners by extension, those who are not on your baseball team, to understand. When we hear this here, we should pay attention because it is advice being given as to what will keep us competitive and or the wrong direction we're going. Is that correct?
Correct. And there's a big thing here too, that if you downgrade countries, would that mean that the country would now have to, since they're paying a higher interest rate to borrow, would that raise the debt? So like Barbados, for example, they have been downgraded. So will that mean now that the Barbados debt situation will raise as a result of being downgraded? Well, this is something still I need to research, but it is a valid question. In other words, the credit rating agencies, do they themselves cause higher debt for countries who wish to borrow? So that's a important question that need to be addressed.
And the reason why I ask you to, I got that, and the reason I ask you the question equally is because Moody's give as the top two reasons for the downgrade. Speaking of the ineffective management of the economy, they of course refer to the increased borrowing by the government relative to GDP. But I wonder if they were making a criticism here of the way we are managing our money when they make the statement, the ineffective management of the economy.
Well, these credit rating agencies, remember, they do not run your country. Eh? They could only advise investors what's to be expected about your ability to repay the loan. So that's all they do. Now, the management of the country depends on the politician, economists like me, and other people. But really and truly, is we who have to manage the country. And we have to take charge of the management of the country. Credit rating agencies are just advisors. Yeah.
And that is exactly what the Prime Minister has said. We are in charge of our medication. Let us take it now before we are force-fed some castor oil that we cannot even digest. Right? From what you're seeing, from the way things are, we understand it's a shortage of money coming in. You've got debt, but we are still, as you said, as they said, stable. And as you made clear to us, we are still in the market where we can borrow without paying ridiculous rates for borrowing. We are clear on that. Do you anticipate for the long term if further downgrades will happen, or do you think we're close to stabilizing our situation the way it is, or is it too hazardous to comment in that area?
Let me say that we have to do budget shortly. We have to do a budget. This would be a very critical budget because it is likely to we're likely to borrow for this budget. Now, if we are borrowing, the question is how much would it carry up your interest rate to? So how much you'll have to actually pay to borrow money.
It is cognizance of that why we ask you here this morning too, because if we have to borrow and you look at what the credit rating agencies are saying, and we have to pay more for borrowing money.
So what happened is that the government they had an IPO for First Citizens. In other words, they're trying to sell state assets in order to reduce how much they have to borrow by. So that's a serious situation because you have to sell assets in order to reduce borrowing. So that's one. The second, and by the way, Barbados had tried that. They had tried selling assets in Barbados to reduce borrowing. But they still end up being downgraded.
Falling short, yes.
Yeah, because they just as you said, they fell short. And so we find ourselves now in that situation where we have to sell state assets as much as possible in order to reduce how much we have to borrow. So that's an important point.
That's always a one hand, two hand balancing act, because if you sell some state assets and it means that private companies come in, they're going to move to be more efficient. Usually they unemploy people, so your unemployment roll could swell. While you're raising the money on the one hand by selling the assets, you inheriting or creating another situation that is going to put a strain on the treasury anyway.
Put it this way: economics is never stable. It's a very dynamic science, if you call it a science at all. So we need to borrow in order to sustain ourselves. The rate you could borrow at will never remain constant. So in economics, we have to get used to the fact that the situation will be changing all the time.
I got a couple of good revealing points from you because, one of the things folks hit the panic button for is the minute they hear that a country is borrowing, they think that is a problem. Every country in the world borrows. I mean, at the end of the day, sometimes you've got to use a little bridge. Sometimes you need a bridge, and sometimes to develop, to make money, you have to borrow.
Put it this way, as brave as the United States is, they have to borrow.
That's right. That's
And
right.
in fact, they're highly indebted to China. Yeah, they're highly indebted to China. Yeah,
Those
so
are just the realities. Countries must borrow.
of-
It is just how you do with these credit agencies. So, in the final analysis, you did mention that this is going to be a pivotal, a very important budget. Do you anticipate a further contraction in subsidies to a lot of the services in Trinidad and Tobago? And do you also foresee any dislocation of workers further in the energy sector?
you could expect a further contraction in subsidies. I mean, we're dealing here with international community who will say, well, look, you need to actually reduce the subsidies. And because there's a belief, the Washington consensus, their consensus is subsidies are bad. Therefore, cut your subsidies. So you could expect, if you want to fall in line with the international community, that we'll have to cut our subsidies. So that's one. And what's the second question again?
Whether you expect us to have more people on the unemployment line.
Yeah. Now, I chuckle at that question because it's a very, very painful question to answer.
You don't want to panic people, but there are some realities. If you're taking home 5 cents when you used to take home 15, you're going to have problems.
You see, what had happened before, when we were boasting of low unemployment, 3% was the highest unemployment we had. Whereas countries like in the United States, their unemployment rate was high. So how come we was defying gravity? It was because we were actually paying people
To work.
to work.
I mean, yes, creating work. Make work.
So yeah, make work. The kind of make work programs that we had. Now, it will be a challenging because we do not have oil prices continue to be low. We don't have the finances to finance employment. As a result, you could find that the government they find it very difficult now to generate employment. So,
Dr. Birchwood, give me the injection. You're handing me a tablet. Truth of the matter is, you expect some people to go home, don't you?
well, I hope not.
I cannot get him to concede that. I think smart economists never hazard into that territory anyway.
The government is committed. So let's see if the commitment can pay off.
We'll see how this goes.
Yeah.
Doctor, I'm sorry that you got caught up in traffic, but I'm so glad that I got a chance to at least get clarity on some of this credit worthiness. The three credit agencies, Fitch, S&P, and Moody's, coming in with differing reports. I understand now clearer where they are, in addition to, hitherto I was unaware of the Caribbean body for monitoring. So again, you made that clear to us this morning.
Pleasure.
Thank you so much for coming in, sir.
Thank you.
I want to thank Dr. Birchwood for coming in, albeit even though he ran into traffic, he persevered and he got here, and for that I am very thankful. I am also thankful to Dr. Botiwari for joining us. We started out the morning with Joseph Rennie, who is the Secretary General of the Communication Workers Union. Thank you so much, Joseph, for coming in. Errol Pilgrim, veteran political journalist and columnist. Also Rishi Maharaj for being here. And we started the morning with criminal attorney Rekha Ramjit. Thank you so much. Thank you for joining me. Have yourself a wonderful day, and we'll, of course, see you tomorrow morning at 5 o'clock.